Good afternoon, fifth grade. Today we're going to start our next chapter on the colonies. There were 13 of them. In chapter 6, we talked about the first three colonies, Jamestown and Plymouth. Roanoke, which kind of existed, but not really. And what we are going to talk now about is the 13 colonies, how they were, the reason they were founded, their geography, kind of including like their climate, what makes them that area of the eastern United States, the economies they have. Their economies were all based on the region that they were in and the government that they had. They each had a slightly different way of ruling. So what you need from your binder, from your previous binder, is the paper that says Chapter 7 at the top. It's in this social studies section, and you have this folded big piece of paper that looks like this. My class had it attached. Some were, this was in the back of the binder, and some this was just the paper they had. Separate where it says Chapter 7. So we're using that right now. The first thing I'm going to go over is vocabulary for this section, as well as we are going to do the New England colonies. So we're going to focus on 2 of the New England colonies, and then you're going to be assigned a project for the next few weeks where you get to pick an actual colony, and you're going to do little advertisements about drawing people into the new colonies. Remember from Jamestown, Sam mentions that like all these boats come with people, and it's like because the Virginia Company in England was saying that, oh, it's a paradise. There's gold mountains everywhere. So there are reasons why people were coming from Europe to the New World, to the Americas, to start these new colonies. And that's what we're going to focus on because there wasn't a lot of gold. All right, so let's begin reading. I'm going to read the introduction, and then we're going to go straight into the reason for founding, and the state abbreviations are there. Colors, I forgot. It's not a lesson. We're not coloring with Mrs. Armini. So take out 2 colors that you want for the New England colonies. I think I'm going to start the New England colonies. I'll probably do them yellow. If you want to get like a marker or a color pencil or crayon for when we do or color code our key in our map here. Okay? And something to write with is what you'll need for this lesson. All right, Roanoke, Jamestown, and Plymouth were the first English colonies in North America. As time passed, more settlers arrived and the existing colonies grew. Plymouth became part of Massachusetts Bay Colony, Jamestown part of Virginia. Other colonies also developed along the Atlantic coast of what would become the United States. And remember, this is like in the 1600s, so about like 20, no, that's wrong. God, I can't count. Like 80 years before the next colonies are also established. In 1707, England and Wales joined Scotland under one government. The nation was called Great Britain. Its people were British. By the mid-1700s, Great Britain had 13 colonies in the North America. So between 1607, when Jamestown was created or founded, until almost 100 years, right? It took 100 years to form the 13 colonies. There were 3 regions within the 13 colonies: New England colonies, the Middle colonies, and the Southern colonies. Each region had its unique characteristics to offer. The types of people, geographies, and economies varied from region to region. And we know that because we also talked about the Native Americans. So we know that the Native Americans in each region of the United States live differently based on their geographies, the industries, and their natural resources that they had. Some regions were home to people of the same religion. Other regions were diverse and welcomed all types of settlers. The regions had distinct geographic features that shaped much of their settlers' lifestyles. These features included landforms, natural resources, and climates. Because of this, people in different regions produced different things. A region's economy was based on these local products and services. An economy is the way in which people use resources to produce, sell, or trade goods and services to meet their wants. The colonies within each region differed as well. For example, the colonies had different governments. Some had governments that were more democratic than others. And all of these things help, these reasons, these economies and governments lead to the reasons hundreds of years later that lead to the revolution. All right, so let's start with vocabulary. So from our vocabulary list on your paper, we have most of the words from this lesson. So economy is the way people use their resources to meet their needs and wants. Indentured servant, a person who works for a period of time to pay off money owed for a debt. For example, Sam could be considered an indentured servant, right? He didn't necessarily had a debt, but he was taken off the streets, was a homeless orphan in England, and became a servant to Captain Smith. Granted, that's fictional, but he would be an example of what would be an indentured servant. Industry is a group of businesses that produce certain goods or services. A group of businesses that produce a certain goods or services. So, for example, we have like the wine industry here in Sonoma County. Plantation is a large farm on which crops are grown by free workers or slaves. We covered that in our last chapter. The West Indies are the islands of the Caribbean, and we covered that from chapter 5 when we talked about the explorers. All right, so what we're going to start with first are the middle colonies. So you need your large piece of paper, and we're going to focus on the the New England colonies today. Pardon me. So the New England, Middle, and Southern colonial regions. So people came to each of the colonial regions for different regions for different reasons. Each region had its own geography. Each region offered settlers special choices and ways of life. The New England region included the colonies of Massachusetts Bay, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. It had rocky soil, dense forests, and natural harbors that gave easy access to the sea. New England's economy was built on small farms, lumbering, fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. A region's economy is how the people use their resources to sustain themselves. Most New England colonists were originally Puritans. They wanted to change the practices of the Church of England, or the Anglican Church religion, which was an important part of their lives. Religion was an important part of their lives. The middle colonies included New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. This region had rich soil, farmers raised livestock, and grew crops. They sold pork, beef, wheat, and barley, a type of grain, or to other colonies. The middle colonies had a diverse population. The region's strong economy attracted people from other European countries besides Great Britain, such as Germany and Ireland. These people held many different religious beliefs. The southern colonies included Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. This region's geography favored cash crops. Rich men came to this region from Great Britain. They grew cash crops such as tobacco and rice on their plantations. Plantations needed many workers. At first, landowners used American Indians as indentured servants to plant and harvest plantation crops. Indentured servants also worked in other places in the colonies. Soon, Southern landowners began to replace these workers with enslaved Africans. So here's our map of the 13 colonies, and today we're going to be talking about the New England colonies. So Massachusetts Bay, the New England colonies. And on our paper, I kind of already colored in and highlighted the New England colonies. So what we're going to pay attention while we're reading is, and I forgot to color in the key, the New England colonies. Reason for founding. So we're going to start with Massachusetts. Why was it founded? Its geography, its economy, and its government. All right, so we want to pay attention to those key points. The first group of settlers to come to Massachusetts Bay were the Pilgrims, who arrived in Plymouth in 1620. They wanted to leave the Church of England. A group of Puritans seeking religious freedom, led by John Winthrop, formed the Massachusetts Bay Colony. They settled in New England in 1630. These Puritans wanted to freely practice their religious beliefs in their new home. So that is the reason why they were founded. The rugged geography of New England did not make the Puritans give up their plan. The soil was rocky and winters could be harsh, but there were also vast forests and clean water. The winter cold killed insects and germs that caused disease. So colonists in New England often lived longer than people in other regions. So the geography is rugged, had harsh winters, vast forests, but it had lots of fresh water. The region supported many industries. Colonists grew crops and raised animals on small farms. Men cut lumber from trees to build houses and trading ships. Many colonists also worked as fishermen and whalers. Fishing provided food, while whale fat was used to make oils and candles. So their economy, they grew crops, raised animals. They had lumber, fishing, whaling, and shipbuilding were our economy. Massachusetts had a more democratic government than most countries in Europe. At first, only Puritan men could vote. But as time passed, all men who owned land could vote. To solve local problems, the colonists met at town meetings and made decisions by majority rule. This was the first truly democratic form of local government in the colonies. Settlers elected representatives to the colony lawmaking body. John Winthrop was elected governor 12 times between 1630, when it was founded, and 1649. And we want to pay attention to the, like, when we look at the colonies, at their government structure, because during the American Revolution, and the conflicts that eventually develop with Britain and the king and parliament, the governments of the 13 colony helped to become the structure for what will be our current structure of government that we have now. All right, so if we look at our chart, let's look at what we have of all of our points, right? The reason they were founded: Puritans seeking religious freedom. It was founded by John Winthrop in 1630. The geography is rugged, rocky soil, harsh winters, vast forests, and clean water. The economy was based on crops, livestock, fishing, whaling, shipbuilding, and lumber. And the government was very democratic. Men who owned land voted. There were town meetings, and they had elected representatives. All right, so now we're going to move to Rhode Island. Rhode Island, New England colony. From its start, Rhode Island offered people religious freedom. In 1631, a young minister named Roger Williams began to criticize the Puritan leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. He thought the government and religion should be separate. Because of this, the leaders forced him to leave the colony in 1635. Williams spent the winter with some American natives. In 1636, he started a town called Providence, which later became the capital of Rhode Island. Rhode Island welcomed people with different religious beliefs to live in the colony. Puritan Anne Hutchinson also lived in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. She, like Williams, spoke out against some Puritan practices and beliefs. In 1637, she was put on trial for her religious ideas. The court found her guilty and forced her to leave the colony. She too moved to what would become part of Rhode Island, where she could freely practice her beliefs. All right, so we have two people that helped found it, and it was found mainly for people to have to practice their religious beliefs freely, and to make sure that the government was separate from the church or from religion. Rhode Island's geography helped colonists build a strong economy. Narragansett Bay and local rivers provided fish and routes for travel and trade. Men trapped animals and traded the furs. The forest supplied timber, and the soil in southern Rhode Island was good for farming. While winters were sometimes harsh, the summer rains helped crops grow. So we have the geography full of rivers, vast forests, so there's animals, and there was good farming and livestock. Many Rhode Island colonists were farmers who raised livestock and grew corn, apples, onions, and many other crops on small farms. Other colonists were traders. Ships from Rhode Island carried goods such as rum, wool, and flax to England and the West Indies. Flax is a plant from which linen, cloth, and oil are made. Some colonists became rich in the trade of enslaved West Africans, even though few Rhode Island colonists themselves owned slaves. Rhode Island was one of the most democratic colonies. At first, most men could vote for the colony's governor and local officials. Later on, only men who owned property could vote, but they did not have to practice a certain religion. All right, so let's get this here. All right, so we have in 1636 and 1637, we have Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson. They were dissenters, meaning they dissented the Massachusetts Bay Colonies and refused to follow the Puritan practices and didn't agree with it. And the government, they thought government should be separate from religion and that all religious beliefs should be allowed. So the geography, they have rivers, forests, rich soil, cold winters, but they had summer rains, which was great for growing. Their economies were shipping, trading products with the West Indies. They were farmers. They had cash crops, and people were involved in the slave trade. And their government was the most democratic. Men who owned land could vote and did not have to follow a religion. whereas in the Massachusetts Bay, they were Puritans. So the Massachusetts Bay was very religious, which is funny considering they left England to be able to follow their religion, and yet they created a colony that was very strictly religious. So very interesting nonetheless. All right, that is the end for today's lesson on the Massachusetts and Rhode Island. There are other colonies here, and as I said later on, after we finish this chapter, you'll have an opportunity to pick a colony from each of the regions and do a little project presentation on each of one of the colonies. All right, our next lesson, we're going to talk about the middle colonies. Have a great day, 5th grade.